Bear with me for a second. I know that a lot of horror movies are disappointing. Nowadays, the premises are either too basic, recycled, and not really entertaining. And what's worse, the only scary parts are the jump scares. And that makes me a bit sad, because horror should not just be a temporary situation, but a concept that should live rent-free in your head. And for this video, I could be talking about disturbing movies such as Salo, Fuba, or a Serbian film. Instead, I decided to tone this video down a bit and present you with simply good horror films, which were not meant to give you a trauma. After all, Halloween and the Month of Terror would not be complete if I didn't present you with interesting horror concepts only made to entertain and make you remember it for how well crafted it was. Enough said. Here's 5 good horror movies I recommend you to watch. Roll the intro. The Others. I remember being a little kid when I watched this movie and how not many people talked about it. Released in 2001 and starring Nicole Kidman, the plot revolves around a woman in 1945 who lives in a house with her 2 children who happen to have a very specific skin condition in which they are very sensitive to light. Because of this, she needs to keep the house covered in curtains and avoid any amount of light from entering the house. One day, a housekeeper, Mrs. Bertha Mills, gardener Edmund Tuttle, and a mute girl named Lydia arrive, all seeking employment. Nicole's character, Grace, hires them and is pleased to learn the 3 worked in the same house years prior. Grace's daughter, Anne, claims to be regularly visited by a young boy named Victor, his parents, and an elderly blind woman. Grace believes this to be a fantasy, but after she begins hearing footsteps and disembodied voices herself, she orders the house to be searched, believing there could be intruders. In a storage room, she finds a 19th century photo album containing photographs of the corpses. Mrs. Mills recounts that many left in 1891 due to an outbreak of tuberculosis. Grace begins to fear that there are supernatural entities in the home, but struggles to reconcile such things with her rigid Catholic faith. The plot revolves in Grace figuring out this mystery for the sake and protection of her children. But the more things she discovers, the more questions start to appear as the plot moves forward. Instead of relying on cheap jump scares and screams, the entire environment of this movie already conditions you into believing that something isn't right and there's more than what meets the eye. The dark environments are justified for the sake of the plot, and as you connect the dots for the final twist, you'll finish the movie feeling empty and yet amazed by the incredible photography, acting, and writing of this movie. I would rather not spoil the twist of this movie. Trust me, it's a once-in-a-lifetime chance for you to be amazed. Pontypool. Zombies have come in many shapes and sizes. Some were good, others were great, and others were a bit repetitive or boring. In this Canadian production, we've got a new twist on the zombies, and for me to sell you this movie, I have to give you very minor spoilers. But don't worry, even though there are many twists in the story, the main one is still a huge sign of clever writing. Released in 2008, The plot revolves around a man, Grant Mazzy, talking on his phone when he is approached by a woman who keeps saying the word blood constantly without making any sense. As he rolls his window down, the woman disappears in the darkness without saying a word. When he arrives at his workplace, he receives the news of people rioting and becoming increasingly violent, aggressive, and impossible to reason with. It's important to mention that Grant and his co-workers are working from a radio station, so the news they are receiving are vague and difficult to decipher. People call letting the producer know that people are becoming violent out of nowhere, as if something sprouted from inside of them, but not enough information is received to understand the situation. When they receive the guests for a musical on their show, who do a very questionable musical and politically incorrect act for the show that they are promoting, one of the members starts mumbling words that make no sense and gets stuck in a loop, just like the first woman who screamed blood at the beginning of the movie. After that, they received an encrypted transmission from BBC, which is an instruction to remain indoors, not to use terms of endearment, baby talk, rhetorical discourse, or the English language, and not to translate the message. Pontypool is declared to be under quarantine. This movie does not have the typical zombies we know for being infected by a virus, a mushroom, rabies, or a spell, but rather mental regression forcing them into a primal state triggered by specific words. And these words attract them to a specific location where the words were located. And the worst part? By the time they receive the instructions, it's too late for the protagonists of the story. The so-called zombies are marching to the main source of triggering words for most of its infected, the radio station. So far, you can see that this is full of twists here and there, but the way the movie continues is very well written. Because, at least in my opinion, it could only be written and directed in Canada. I won't spoil it for you either, because it's a must-watch as well. Wreck. Many of you already know about this movie, probably by the name Quarantine, but the original Spanish version called Rec is one that shook a lot of viewers in the mid-2000s. Rather than giving you a full explanation of the plot, I'll just give you the basic description. Reporter Ángela Vidal and her cameraman Pablo are covering the night shift in one of Barcelona's local fire stations for the television series While You're Sleeping. The firehouse receives a call about an old woman, Mrs. Izquierdo, who is trapped in her apartment. Ángela and Pablo accompany two of the firefighters, Alex and Manu, to the apartment building on Rambla de Catalunya. The old woman becomes aggressive and attacks one of the police officers, biting his neck. The crew finds that the police and military have sealed off the building and trapped them inside. With that said, you can already tell that this is another zombie type of movie, but in the style of 28 Days Later, combined with found footage format, which in my opinion has been executed perfectly. Not only is the camera movement erratic and unsettling, but the sound design as well. From the moments of very thrilling silence to the unsettling jump scares that are justified here compared to cheap horror made in other movies. If you want a biased opinion from this entertainer, allow me to say that I believe this to be the most realistic zombie movie next to 28 Days Later. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you end up enjoying this movie, you'll feel lucky to know that it also has a sequel, which acts like a prequel to the events of the first movie. Annihilation. We are moving from the thrilling jump scares to the psychological horror. Hollywood has made some mediocre horror movies in the last years, but you got to give them credit when they deserve it. Starring Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaac, Annihilation is one of the best representations for Lovecraftian horror. Released in 2018, the story revolves about cellular biology professor and former US Army soldier Lena, who is under interrogation after experiencing the events that took place inside the Shimmer, a strange quarantine zone where she was the only one to return. Prior to this, Lena's husband Kane and his squad entered this quarantine zone, who was affected from a meteor that landed in a lighthouse in the St. Mark National Wildlife Refuge in Florida, and it is gradually expanding and increasing its boundaries. When Kane returns after 1 year of being missing, his psyche has decreased immensely and his health gets worse, spitting blood and his internal organs failing to an abrupt pace. Lena decides to embark to the Shimmer with a squad of female scientists and soldiers to investigate, since every squad prior to them were all male and still suffered from horrible health conditions and deformities. It's not radiation, temperature, or gravity, something weirder happening inside the area. Due to the biological factors taking place in this quarantine zone, maybe a group of people with different biological structure would be luckier in this expedition, only to be proven wrong. When the new squad enters the Shimmer, they wake up 3 days later with no memory of what they've done prior to that. Compasses don't work, radio signals get distorted, and if that wasn't enough, the scientific knowledge of every member allows them to notice that flora and fauna of that place is unusual. Multitude of plant species are born from the same branch. Animals have distinctive features not possible in the real world, and they end up discovering the records of Kane's squad expedition. As the group starts to get deeper into the Shimmer, more strange events start to happen. All biological entities in that place mutated to extents that defy human reasoning and logic, like a tumor. Plants taking human shapes, minerals growing in places where they shouldn't, and even the squad starts experimenting changes in their bodies. Having said that, it is a movie where nothing can be predicted, as the philosophical, scientific, and logical aspects can be summarized as randomized or left at the fate of pure chaos. Maybe the being that infects everything in their surroundings is not evil, but simply exists and adapts. But hey, that's for you to find out. Tumbad. There are a lot of hidden gems in Bollywood's cinema that not many people talk about, which is a shame because they deserve more recognition. Of course, you've got the examples of Slumdog Millionaire, Life of Pi, and RRR. But what about horror? Well, I've got for you a movie that took 6 years to be made, and the result ended up being so impressive that could easily be expanded into its own universe. Released in 2018 and directed by Rai Anil Barve, Tumbad is not just a horror film, but a fantasy one as well. Imagine a Lovecraftian horror universe set in India, where the goddess of prosperity gives birth to 160 million gods. Hastar, her first and most beloved offspring, was greedy for all her gold and food. This god manages to steal the gold, but wants the wheat she produces too. Being discovered by the other gods, they aim to kill him, but the goddess protects him and keeps him eternally in her womb. The only condition? was that nobody could ever worship him and he would remain in slumber eternally until the people of Tumbad started to worship him, forcing his awakening. Thousands of years later, Tumbad's story takes place in three different chapters: 1918, 1930, and 1947. In the first year, the main character of the story, Vinayak Rao, has the task of feeding his grandmother to make her fall asleep. Her grandmother, however, is not like any typical old lady, but rather a deformed one who is immortal but keeps aging nonetheless. The second and third chapter shows the story of Sohum Shah's character, Vinayak Rao, being incredibly prosperous for bringing golden coins to sustain his family. The thing is, nobody knows where these coins come from. In the third chapter, however, we see how Vinayak tells his son how he got the coins to begin with and shows him the entrance of the god Hesta, who lies inside of a flesh cave that resembles a womb. In here, Vinayak has been following the dormant god to steal his coins and sustain his family for many years, and now it's his son's turn to do the same. I've been very vague with the story on purpose, as the plot of this movie deserves to be explored and enjoyed. From cinematography, camera work, makeup, special effects, and overall idea. This movie was originally drafted in 1997, and there were multiple studios who rejected the idea until it was finally approved in 2012, only to be released in 2018. 6 years in the making, costing $630,000, and so much passion put into it actually gave amazing results, as the movie ended up earning $1.7 million at the box office. Normally, I like to end these videos for the month of terror with a chilling and eerie feeling, but this time I prefer to share with you these recommendations and ask you to let me know what you thought of them. This has been Juano, and thank you for watching.